What is up and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be working on my 2004 Subaru Forester that I've turned into quite the adventure rig. Today we're going to be installing these. These are limb risers used to protect, well, your car when you're going through some pretty tight trails like you've seen on our ventures. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. But before we go ahead and start building the limb risers, we first got to talk about what we'll be using today. And well, the parts are actually pretty simple and you can find them on most online stores, or that's at least where I found mine. So we're going to start with, well, what we're using to attach it to the car itself. We're just going to be using a little piece of a scrap metal here. This is actually a piece of metal that I use when I put on my roof rack. So you can grab anything that is kind of strong enough to hold a little bit of tension, but not anything that needs to be like structurally sound. The next part is, well, something to attach it to, in this case for me, a roof rack. For most of you, it's going to probably be a roof rack too, because it's just the simplest way to do this. If you don't have a roof rack, it's going to be pretty hard to attach it to anything up there. So I'd recommend, if you're doing this, get yourself a roof rack first. But we'll just be using some of these little clamps here that clamp onto the rod or the tubing of the roof rack itself, and then provides a little mounting hole right here for our next piece. And our next piece is, well, these little wire buckles. I'm not sure what the exact terminology is for these, but they essentially have a little clevis pin that kind of goes in here, and this will go through our point right here, and then it will also go through our point up here, and then it just has a little like grip on here that kind of clamps onto our wire and holds it so that it doesn't slip away. And well, speaking of wire, you're gonna have to grab yourself some wire. I'm particularly using 3mm wire here. I did a little bit of research to what like the kits will use, and honestly they all kind of use about 3mm wire, because any thicker you're going to be probably wrecking stuff, and any thinner it's going to be pretty thin and you might end up snapping that before something else gives way. Like my main breakaway point is going to be the wires in here. If there's too much force, it's going to pull through here instead of hopefully breaking my mounting. But with that and our parts all ready to go, we can go ahead and start attaching it to the vehicle. And well, we're gonna start up top and talk about how we're gonna mount it to the roof rack. As I mentioned, you probably want a roof rack to do this installation just because it's gonna make your life a lot easier and you won't have to figure out some weird, wacky way to mount it to your roof. For me in particular, I'm going to be mounting it to this bar using this. This is what's used to mount lights to ATVs. So it's got a little loop here that I'm going to undo, clamp it on here, and then put it right here so that it kind of gives us a spot to mount. But if you have a more conventional roof rack with something with T-slots, that's where you're going to maybe just going to want to put an eyelet in. And then you can actually run your cable from that eyelet down, or use something similar that goes into the eyelet. Another option is to use something that clamps onto your bars and then have a way to mount to that. I'm pretty sure they make stuff exactly like this, but for crossbars, so you should be able to find something to mount it to your roof rack. If you're doing it without a roof rack, good luck to you, because I'm not exactly sure what I would be doing. And well, with that being said, let's go ahead and mount it to my roof rack. So with one of these, you have a couple different options. So you can actually pivot this piece on this mounting piece. Why I'm mounting it like this is I'm trying to get this mounting to a round flat bar right here instead of on this curve, which is actually behind one of my halo lights here. So I'm going to be mounting this as far as I can this way and sticking it out as far as I can this way. Because we have pretty much just lateral force and nothing pushing against it, I don't see an issue in doing this. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna undo this little bolt right here, and we're going to take this out, make sure it doesn't roll away on us. And we have this. This is what's going to mount to the bar. So if you don't want to cause any scratches, good luck. You could probably tape it. I'm at this point, as you can see, the roof rack's a little rough. Eventually, I think I would want to powder coat it black anyway, so I'm not too worried. As long as it's not rusting, it's doing well. But I'm gonna go ahead then and just kind of push this over the bar and try not to cause too much damage, but as you can see, it's pretty loose. And then hopefully, if everything goes well, you should just be able to toss that nut on, kind of get that in that groove, and just do this up. And with this done, you're pretty much already got your top mounting position ready to go. That being said, because we don't have a nice bumper bar up front with a little hoop, we can't do this method down below. So we're going to have to do something a little more creative, and I'll show you that in a second. Now, normally these limb risers are attached to usually a hoop right here, as I mentioned, or if you have a Jeep, the mounting point right here in the Jeep. But we drive a Subaru and we don't have any hoops, so we had to get a little creative and think of a different option. I went through kind of a few different options of maybe like looping it around here, mounting it here, and then putting something here, or figuring out a way to attach to the hood or attach to the fender. The fender was looking like a good idea, but unfortunately it's too many like bubbles to kind of figure out. You could use a thinner metal, but then I would fear the metal would just rip through. So I thought of, well, a different option. And well, that option includes this little piece of metal that I mentioned at the start, as well as, well, a propane bottle. We're going to be heating and bending this piece of metal. This is, as I said, some pretty good stainless from a roof rack. So it's gonna take a little bit of heat, but we're going to be making a little bit of a bracket that actually is going to go, I think it's like right here. And it's going to hold that wire from a roof rack right here. I know what you're saying. It's going to bend the hood. Well, maybe with both of them tensioned right, we should be able to keep a pretty good amount of tension on it. If I do hit something, it might flex a little, but my thought is because we're using the wire clevis, kind of ones that grip onto the wire instead of like clamping onto the wire, it should be the first thing to fail if I hit something doing like 60 on a road. I don't see it if I'm going through branches stuff really being an issue. It's just that high speed impact I think might be an issue of ripping the hood. So I think we're going to see a failure of the mounting point of the wire rather than the hood itself. But this is a very dented hood, so if we manage to do some damage, it's gonna make one good YouTube video and it's gonna teach both of us a lot. And you're probably asking yourself, where the heck is this little piece going to go? Well, if you can see, there is actually a little hole right here that Subaru used for this little trim piece, which I'm going to use because if you grab yourself a pretty coarse screw, you can just go ahead and kind of screw this in here. And what you're gonna do is just gonna build a bracket that clamps on to kind of the front, but then also screws into the hood itself because somehow that works out way better than expected. One thing to note is there's a little bit of a bump here, so you're gonna kind of go down, and I'll show you this, but like down here, up, and then bend around, and that's kind of what it's gonna look like. So we're gonna be doing some pretty interesting bends with this, but I don't think it'd be too difficult when we're using some heat. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start bending our bracket. And well, like I said, we're gonna be heating up our bracket to kind of figure out the bends that we want to make. So what we want to do really is kind of take a look at the bodywork, as I said. So we're gonna have a gentle curve here that kind of follows the top of the hood, and then we're gonna have a little divot in here. I did make a cardboard template, but as much as it's gonna take to bend this, what I'm gonna be doing is just gonna be heating up, getting the bend that I want, and then testing it against the cart and kind of going along that way. There's probably a much easier way and a much simpler way to do it than this, but I think this is gonna be a little bit of fun. So as I said, I'm just using propane to heat this stainless steel up. You usually want something a little bit hotter if you're doing actual metalwork, but this will be a little bit of an experience that I think we should be able to do. And then I'll just be using some chisels to kind of get it into the positions I want to hammer it with my big old hammer here. And we should be able to get something that kind of resembles a bracket in probably, I don't know, 20 minutes of kind of hammering it out and getting it looking like we want it to. I think I'm also gonna smooth out these edges here with just a little angle grinder so that we get a nice smooth curve so that it doesn't catch when the pin is in here. So that's kind of the plan, and have fun with it. But don't burn yourself when you're grabbing the metal. Make sure you're using your pliers, and while you're doing this, eyeglasses and hearing protection are definitely something you should be using when you're hitting metal against metal. So let's go ahead and get this done. And well, there we go. We have our two brackets to mount our limb risers to our hood. As I said, it did take a little bit to go ahead and heat and cool them and then use a chisel to manipulate them, but I think they turned out really well for just using what I have. Usually you want to use a little more heat like MAP gas or acetylene to get it a little bit easier to manipulate, but it worked pretty well for us and I'm happy with this. One thing is I would like to maybe paint these in the future. I'm not going to paint them now because we're just testing them, but in the future I think I want to put some self-etching primer on it because it is raw metal, and then go ahead and paint them black, but I think the silver will look good here. With that being said, we are pretty much ready to go. And what we're gonna do before we toss this on the car is there's a little piece of black rubber I'm just gonna put on the inside here with some super glue so that when it's compressed on the hood, it's actually gonna go ahead and not rattle around, because I have a feeling metal on metal, if it kind of starts shaking, it's gonna rattle around quite a bit. So I'm just gonna put a little piece of rubber there, super glue it, and then we can go ahead, throw these on the car and see what our limb risers look like. And well, it's time to go ahead and install the cable. One thing to mention is you're gonna want one of these buckles undone for this, because as you twist it, it's going to get all bound up and it's going to want to spin back. So obviously these, we can't really undo that easily. So we're gonna go up top and we're gonna undo our buckle here, and we're gonna go start on the front and then work our way up here. Another thing to mention is we're gonna have our hood propped up about an inch so that we're able to get it slightly tensioned, and then when we go ahead do the first click, there's gonna be a little bit of tension, and then when you push it down, it should be all the way tensioned on the steel rope. So that is our plan. Let's go ahead, get this one undone, and focus on that. Okay, we're gonna start up here as I mentioned. So we're gonna take a look at what this actually is. So it's a threaded portion with a nut here, and then this little like kind of diamond thing, and it's got this little thing. This is what actually clamps onto your cable. So this is kind of the most important thing. And what happens is when you feed it in here, it's going to kind of compress it all together when you do this up. So that's what we're going to be doing. And then once you have your cable, you can see that it kind of feeds in here. So you can have a little bit of room to play, but not much. So I'm going to try to line it up with this here. We're going to go ahead. We're going to first feed what our kind of clamp. Then we're going to take this inner portion, feed this into here, and then I'm gonna just try to line it up with the end here. This is kind of what I feel works best. And then you're gonna go ahead, take this. I'm actually gonna just push it a little bit in there, like this, and then you're gonna go ahead and feed this through here. And I'm gonna loosen this off a bit. You're gonna want to tighten this as tight as you can, because what it's doing is clamping down on your steel line. I'm actually going to go ahead and use a wrench for this to make sure it's nice and tight. And then up here, we're going to go ahead, we're going to take this one off. We just kind of put that up there to figure everything out. We're going to go ahead, we're going to take this one off because we're going, as I said, when you twist the nut, it actually twists the whole cable. So it's going to make it very difficult. So we're just going to pull this off and kind of just place this right here. We're going to go ahead and take our cable and we're going to kind of spool it out. And then, as I said, you're gonna wanna make sure that your hood is kind of popped up on the first little latch, because that's gonna give you the tension when you push down to tension these. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna go put this here, and we're going to measure where we need to essentially cut this cable. One thing to note when you're cutting this is use like an angle grinder, because it is steel cable. It's actually pretty hard to cut. And with your cable cut, you're gonna go ahead and want to install this. So same thing as before, you go ahead, drop the bigger piece, drop this little piece into it. Make sure you got a little tiny bit sticking out. Grab this, I'm gonna back off the nut, put this kind of there, and then do it all up. And maybe before you do it quite all the way up, check your distance. So I'm a little bit off. So what I'm gonna do is let a little bit more off, and then we should be able to line it right up. And then once you have everything tightened down, you can go ahead and attach it to your roof rack here. So I'm gonna go ahead, put the pin through, go ahead and then put this on, and then we can go ahead, do the other side and see how well this works. And well, there we go. We have both sides. This side is a little bit looser than that side, but I think we should be good. So we should be able to pull this off and see. Ooh. This one's definitely tighter. Can I get it? Click. Oh, click down. There we go. This one's tight. This one's very tight. But it's latched down on the hood, which means we have functional brush guards or limb risers. And there we go. The Forester has limb risers. As I said, it was a project that I actually thought of about 6 months ago, but I never had time to do it. And well, this was the time to do it. As you can see, they're pretty tight, so I'm actually excited to see how well they work on the trail. I'm also interested to see what happens, what fails. I still think it's going to be this cable that's going to be the thing that fails if we get something to hit here really fast. But I guess you'll just have to join us on our adventures and find out. And with that being said, make sure you're subscribed and check out the channel membership so you don't miss any of our adventures. And while you're down there, drop a comment and let me know if this is something you do on your Subaru or something you'll skip out on. And check out Flat 4 Off-Road. But that's going to be the end of today's episode, so I will be seeing you in the next adventure.